Live from London, it's Plank of the Week with Mike Graham.
Welcome to this week's edition of Plank of the Week, and what a week it's been. I don't know quite where we're going to start, but this is the one show where you know you can judge as much as you want, because that's what we do, and by the end of it we'll have found somebody to win the prize, which is of course the big Plank of the Week. I'm delighted to say this week we've got a stellar cast with us. Kevin O'Sullivan, Talk TV presenter, joins us. For the first time, Amanda Devlin's here, assistant showbiz editor of The Sun. Welcome. Candice Holdsworth returns. She's a veteran of Plank of the Week. And another newbie, Alan Miller, co-founder of the Together Association. This, of course, is the thing that they are fighting for. It is Le Plank of the Week. I said that because England are playing France, you see, so I'm keeping up with the football. But let's get things started. Kevin O'Sullivan, you're up first.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Chris Whitty, Sir, now known as quotes Sir, close quotes, Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer, for the astonishing situation last week when he announced that due to the lockdowns, Britain would suffer prolonged excess deaths, a prolonged period of worrying excess deaths. And he said this is because of the lockdowns. He neglected to say this is because of the lockdowns I ordained. This is because of the lockdowns I was the architect
Small details.
of. He neglected to apologise to us, and on he went. It's quite astonishing, and it is indicative of the way the authorities are generally about the COVID crisis. None of them, no politician is admitting that the lockdowns may have been the most catastrophic policy globally in the history of mankind. It's about time they did.
Because people forget, it was only this time last year, if you remember, that you came out and told everybody to cancel their Christmas parties. You know, we were all told...
Yes, it was only a year ago.
It was only a year ago, which feels like about 10 years ago, doesn't it? But it was only a year ago that people didn't go away for Christmas. They didn't go and have... a lot of office parties got cancelled. A lot of people who run restaurants had all their bookings cancelled. I mean, I spoke to friends of mine in the restaurant business who were devastated because they were like, we had all these Christmas bookings and they've all just vanished.
Completely spurious.
Who's told everyone not to do it.
Completely wrong as well. We were all bemused, if you remember, last December, because we saw all the data coming out of South Africa that Omicron was mild, it didn't kill you, a couple of days sniffles and you were fine. The chief medical officer of South Africa was screaming from the rooftops, this is great news, it's nothing to worry about, this is the end of the virus as a killer. And yet Chris Whitty said, we don't know enough about it yet, we're still going to lock you down. And on it went. So with Chris Whitty, I'd like to say, next lie, please.
Yes, exactly right. I mean, I thought he disappeared, to be honest, Chris Whitty, because, you know, there was a time when he was there every single day, wasn't there? And he'd come out staring with that funny collar of his that didn't quite fit, about 2 sizes too big.
I'm actually getting...
There he is. I mean, I don't know why he had such trouble. I mean, he has got quite a thin neck, but I mean, I don't think he seems to
small
find
head
a shirt
as well.
that could pinhead, I suppose you would call him. I'm sorry about this, Chris, but, you know, he did ask for it.
I'm
the thing is, now,
flashbacks,
he suddenly disappeared, and I thought he was going to stop being the chief medical officer, but he seemingly still is. I mean, in the old days, it used to be the chief medical officer would just say, you know, only drink 1 glass of red wine a week and you'll stave off cancer and that kind of thing, you know. But now he's all about, you know, he hasn't said much about...
Seen what he's been up to today?
What's he been doing today?
He's issued a statement saying that air pollution, his new bugbear is eco stuff.
Yeah.
He said air pollution is killing 26,000 to 38,000 people a year. And I had a guest on this morning.
I was listening to you this morning.
And I said, well, what does he base this on? The bloke goes, oh, modelling.
Yes.
Oh, not models again.
That was a great interview, right? Because Kevin's going, so how many of these deaths are ascribed to air pollution? The bloke went something like 60,000, was it?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, all right, then how many people have actually died of air pollution that have been nominated as having died of air pollution? He went, 1.
It's 1.
So it's somewhere between 1 and 60,000, right?
Exactly. I mean, I think that's one of the things as well, is that when we were told all these things and the fear and the concerns, and we already knew the damaging impacts of lockdowns already, there were warnings from people like Professor Carol Sikora, is an expert oncologist in cancer. We knew that heart disease and strokes and all of those things were going to be impacted, and people going from stage 1 to stage 4 of cancer. That wasn't something that was new then. And so you had modelling versus a real stark reality, what's meant. And we're now dealing with the ongoing consequences of all of this. In the health service, 7 million people waiting, in social care.
Kids getting strep
exactly, strep A. But across the board, actually, in the economy and the cost of living crisis, cost of lockdown crisis, and you know, just also a sort of heightened sense of, now, with everything, right, there's this kind of public health experts moment where they go, right, this is the next thing. You think, hold on a minute, are we at a perpetual state of crisis and emergency?
You know,
Well, don't worry, because
Stephen
if we're
King.
not, then somebody will put us back in it, you know, like, for example, the NHS strikes.
one last point about Mr. Whitty.
Yes.
Because I'm not calling him Sir Chris, doesn't deserve to be. In Matt Hancock's brilliant pandemic
He might get a mention
diaries,
later.
in Matt Hancock's brilliant pandemic diaries, funniest book I've ever read. At the beginning of the crisis, the pandemic, the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, recalled how a chill went through the cabinet room when Chris Whitty, while sitting in the corner of the room peeling a tangerine like a Bond villain, announced that this COVID virus could kill 830,000 British people. And so Matt Hancock said, at that point we realised we were in big trouble, this was serious. It's like not one of them showed any scepticism about what Chris Whitty said. They didn't challenge it, they just went into overdrive on the basis of this information, which I may remind you was profoundly wrong.
Yeah, well, it was, wasn't it? Well, that's certainly a pretty good start for the planks of the week, although I'm afraid he's up against some pretty stiff competition. I mean, normally that might be a winner, but wait till you hear what Candice has got to say. Come on.
Well, we could not leave out Harry and Meghan. We have to do Harry and Meghan.
You've won.
I lose.
Yeah.
In the show,
I mean, it's hard to believe just how ridiculous these two have been this week, isn't it?
I mean, it's becoming farcical now. So they've released this Netflix documentary and people have seen bits and pieces of it. But they also just received a Human Rights Award from the Ripple of Hope Awards in America for apparently challenging the structural racism of the royal family and their terrible attitude to mental health. And they've been completely validated for this narrative that they've put out there, that they are just terrible victims and the royal family was so bigoted and they mistreated them. And no one's questioning it.
No.
And there's nothing from the other side.
Right.
Kate and William haven't replied at all. They've just been completely pilloried. And I think Harry and Meghan know that they can't say anything and that they can say everything. And if you look at this documentary, it's aimed squarely at the market in America that thinks Britain's become so bigoted since Brexit.
Oh, yes.
And that's why Meghan has been treated this way.
Yes.
They blame Brexit for racism against Meghan.
Yeah, they bring it in. And also, at the start of this documentary, which I'm glad to say I haven't watched, because it started at 8 a.m. this morning. I had some better things to do. But we had somebody watching it for us. And apparently, at some point or other, they have this kind of explainer that says that nobody from Buckingham Palace has commented on.
Well, no,
that's
the very first thing that happened.
Yeah, and of course, Buckingham Palace have now said that actually, no, nobody contacted us.
Pretty fundamental.
Which is a pretty
it's the very
fundamental.
first
They've now
thing,
just
Mike.
disregarded anything like the truth. They're just making it up as they go along now, aren't they?
It's the very first thing.
Yeah.
It comes up. It's the first thing that happens. It just says that the members of the royal family declined to comment on this documentary series.
Yeah.
As you say, they came racing out of the traps, Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace, to deny this, that they were not asked what they thought of this. They were not given the right to reply. That's a fundamental undermining of this entire series.
How can they get away with
it starts
it?
with a lie.
How can they get away with it?
But also,
It's
the first
absolutely
three
outrageous.
shows, as far as I understand it, have got nothing in there, really, about the Buckingham Palace racism.
And you've got to watch I watched the first one this morning.
Yeah.
It's so breathtakingly boring.
It's dull,
It's dull as ditch water.
Do you know what I also find incredible is that this whole thing to portray Britain as being this really nasty, racist, discriminatory society. I spend a lot of time in the States and actually in New York and LA, perhaps they shouldn't be throwing stones, because I think that in Britain, and that actually if you want to look at studies, it demonstrates that we're very tolerant, we're very integrated, and we've got very welcoming, outgoing looks. We actually don't want to be divided by a lot of these things. It's actually perpetuating some of these ideas that's actually doing it. That's not the general view of most
No, America,
people.
I'm going to say it, what you want to say, is America's a far more racist country than Britain is, because people in America live in ghettos.
Well, we know this, don't we?
We both lived there for 10
Every
years.
city has its areas, you know. The blacks live in one place, the Hispanics in the other, the whites in the other. Totally segregated. You're right, Mike. It's a much more racist place than Britain.
Yeah, but the great thing is that when they accepted their award from the crazy Kennedy family, because they really are crazy. In fact, the Kennedys are as mad as the royal family is. You know, they've got their own sort of mad section over here, and the woman who runs that is the crazy one. They actually said with a straight face, we'll continue to fight oppression. I mean, you've just flown there in a private jet. You know, that doesn't tell me that you're oppressed. You know, you've just been driven into Manhattan, probably in a Cadillac Escalade, you know, with some outriders from the police department. That's not really being oppressed. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and not once has Meghan clarified her vague claim of racism in the royal family. There is no structural racism in the royal family. She says there's a racist because somebody wondered what colour her baby might be.
Alleged.
I don't
She
think
didn't, we don't even know if
that's
that happened.
racist anyway. And she's refused to specify who that was, and by keeping it vague, she casts a cloud and a slur over the whole royal family. It's cowardly and it's wrong.
Yeah, it's wholly disproportionate. And dare I say it, bullying. It's actually starting to be bullying now.
Although, as Kevin says, it's quite a dull show so far, and unless they liven it up in the next 3 episodes, then all that's going to happen is that, you know, when they go bleating on about we need to tell our side of the story, it's not very interesting. It's just not very interesting. Their life isn't very interesting. You know, they stagger from one glitzy gala to the next, and they stagger about this huge mansion they've got and presumably talk to their children occasionally. I mean, they actually had the cojones to say on stage, oh, we don't get out much because we've got 2 young children. All they do is go out. They came to Britain. They came to Britain without the kids, right? And they were here for about 3 weeks without the kids.
It is ironic that, and very distasteful actually, that the elevation of victimhood by people that are in such a privileged position. And actually what it does is, when there are really serious issues to deal with in society, and there are issues of racism that we need to address in certain instances, even though things have got much better, it diminishes all of that because you've got this elevation of this victimhood that is quite preposterous.
Yeah. Well, there's a bit more going on in the royal family, aside from the racism. I mean, apart from one of the things that I'm annoyed about with Harry is that he basically has been a sponger on the taxpayer all his life. You know, he's now making a bit of money of his own, thanks to selling out his own family. But basically, you know, he was born into privilege. He was born into the civil list, so that all the money that he got either came from his father or from the taxpayer. So we've actually been funding the little snotty-nosed git. And now he turns round and says, Britain's racist, I'm not going back. Well, good. Stay where you are, mate.
Do you promise?
Yeah. Well, I've said before we should strip him of his, not only his title, but strip him of his British citizenship.
The thing is, that was the fear, wasn't it?
I agree. Get rid of him.
That was the fear, that this documentary series would be so explosive that the King would have to act. But I think what's happened here is we've all been conned by 2 very good trailers.
Grifters.
That made it look very exciting. Typical Hollywood trailer. They take out 5 or 6 really good bits, and then you start to watch the series and you realise those are the only good bits. We've been conned.
Although there is a really funny bit in it, very amusing, and it's that Harry is just talking about how Meghan's family are all, you know, they've been selling stories, and he said it's amazing what people will do for money. Show £88 million. I mean, it's unbelievable.
He's monetised his feud with his dad. That's what he's done.
But it just shows how sort of hypocritical, self-delusional, and they're very divisive. I mean, I found the documentary really uncomfortable to watch. Not only boring, but uncomfortable.
Yeah,
not a good combo.
He has hideously betrayed his own mother.
Yeah,
he's actually making money off the death of his own mother. That's really what he's doing.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's go. Alan, who's your first nomination?
My first nomination is for Oxfordshire County Council, which wants to impose a 15-minute city, which is going to include control zones. It's going to mean you're not going to be able to drive to certain places. They want everyone to walk and cycle. And they've been inspired not just by the lockdowns and restrictions, but actually this is a group internationally called C40 of mayors, which, no surprise, Sadiq Khan is actually the chair of.
Of course he is.
And it's striking that this contempt... The guy who's actually... implementing it on the cabinet has got a title for development and transport, which you couldn't think of anything more Orwellian, because actually this is the opposition of that, the opposing thing. And you got this idea that basically local authorities and councils are so contemptuous of people, and they're so obsessed with this idea of net zero, rather than thinking about how we can have transforming transport networks, better housing, improved infrastructure. They want to limit what we do. They want to restrict it. And then they want to fine and have punitive measures. And it's not just Oxfordshire now, it's others, but we've got this situation where the idea that you can not just nudge, but you can restrict people from going about their daily life, and contemptuously saying, well, you can walk or get a bike. And I really think it reflects the wrong think of local authorities And this idea that he actually, Duncan Enright, who's the cabinet minister, actually said, we're going to do it whatever you think, it's going to happen. He did an interview saying it's happening anyway. So the dispense of any idea of democratic accountability, they've done consultations on LTNs there as well. We've seen that businesses have really been impacted, closed down. It's a lot of the residents are in a furore. Some of the things that have stopped the streets, they've actually tried to move. And he said, we're doing it anyway, regardless of the consultation. So this utter contempt. It's not like it's what everyone wants locally and they're doing it.
Well, it's quite the reverse, isn't it? Because Sadiq Khan is bringing in this ULEZ expansion zone.
Exactly.
But everybody said they didn't want it. You know, like 90% of people said, no, we don't want it. He's like, well, we're doing it anyway. And it's worse than just the net zero nutters. You've now got the sort of clean air nutters as well, like your mate WHITTY, who all think that somehow if you don't drive, the air's going to be cleaner. Well, apparently the air pollution in London is not as bad as it used to be, right? But I've never seen it more congested. So presumably if the air's getting better, it's nothing to do with cars, right?
Well, and also one of the things that is very problematic is when they've been doing the LTNs, local traffic networks in the neighbourhoods, it actually makes more congestion in some areas, which ironically creates some more fumes in those areas. Often it hits the poorest who need to get around in their car with their kids or get them to school and to work. If you've got elderly relatives, you've got to get across town. It also stops emergency vehicles and things like that getting through. It's been a really negative impact. And, you know, actually, Together, we're encouraging people locally in those regions to actually be vocal about it.
Yeah, so if you want to break the, 15-minute rule, do you have to just go to the next zone and go, hang on, I'm going over there, and see if somebody stops you?
Yeah, well, you've got a certain amount of passes a year that you can do, right? And then you start getting fined £70 each time. And people will know
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can... I'm
never going to Oxford. I mean, why
and Oxford, which is such an important cultural and historical city for so many reasons, obviously the university, but also people that have come out of there, and this kind of really regressive outlook about its own residents. And there's a war on cars and there's a war on ordinary people. It's dressed up by being compassionate and nice, but actually it's really contemptuous of everyday people.
Yeah, of course it is.
It really is, especially like you were saying, people with kids. If you've got one child at primary school, one child at a nursery school, you're supposed to take buses to get them. If you're taking elderly relatives around, like, what are you supposed to do? Is everyone supposed to ride a bike? It's utterly ridiculous. That story outraged me this week. I was so furious to hear about that. Such an attack on freedom of movement. And they don't care as well.
And they've forgotten as well, the main part of all of this, which is their job is to work for the people that pay them, and that's the taxpayer. You know, they wouldn't have any money if it wasn't for us, and they charge us money, and then they tell us what to do. It's unbelievable.
Who's the mayor of Oxford? Xi Jinping, is it?
Absolutely right. Now, coming up next, we're going to be nominating the Grinch, who's trying to ruin Christmas. I think you know who I'm talking about. This is Plank of the Week. There we are. Welcome back to Plank of the Week. They can't stop laughing, these four. I don't know what's wrong with them. Anyway, listen, we've got to move on very quickly because there's been so many planks this week. We want to give as much time as possible to all of them. So, Amanda Devlin, you're here for the first time. It's a lucky week to be here because tell us who your nomination is.
Well, there were too many to choose from.
I know.
Too many planks, but I've gone for Matt Hancock.
Excellent. Good choice.
I think this week in particular, I mean, obviously he's...
But why?
He's mates with your mate, Chris Whitty. Is this why you're kind of ganging up a bit?
Tell me about it.
So, Matt could be any week, but this week in particular is because he's obviously got his new book out and he's just come out of the jungle. But on top of that, he's decided to resign. He's going to leave politics. He's not going to run in the next general election.
God for that.
And I can't believe that he's been allowed to quit and we've not sacked him. Like, I cannot believe that after everything, after him going to the jungle, OK, he's made it to the final, he got paid 400 grand.
He came last in the final, though, didn't he? I mean, he did come third.
Yeah, but that is a win. That's a win.
He's got all the way there.
500,000 quid's probably quite a win.
He had a lovely time. He met his girlfriend at the end of the bridge.
Gina Lola-Bridget.
Who he cheated on his wife with
his
wife. And his wife, who, you know, she's been, I think, personally, just so fantastic.
There's not much mention of his wife.
She's not mentioned anything. Whereas
does she get a mention in the book at all? I haven't read the book.
Yeah, I think she does, but
he said that when he got caught by the sun, snogging his girlfriend in the middle of the health department and breaking his own lockdown rules, he then realised he had to go straight home and tell his wife about his affair and his kids. And, you know, the poor guy, he said it was the most difficult conversation he's ever had. I mean, you weep for him, don't you?
I really do.
Unbelievable.
And because his wife has stayed silent and, you know, really dignified, but it's kind of let him get off the hook in some way. And I think that's why this week it just made me furious, the fact that he just seems to be just like a cat with 9 lives and just falling on his feet all the time.
His resignation letter, it was an exercise in epic self-delusion. The truth is, the reason he came to the conclusion he was going to quit was because his constituency party, West Suffolk, wrote to the Tory party in Westminster, to Rishi and the gang, and said, we don't want this guy anymore, we will deselect him. He was informed
he
of
also
this
doesn't have he also doesn't have the Tory whip either, so he can't stand anyway.
But in the first paragraph of his letter, he says, that's about to be restored, and he turns it into this, you know, I've decided to do this. I've found a better way to connect with people than Parliament. Well, in 1 year's time, the way he connects with people, it won't be I'm a Celebrity or Who Dares Wins. It will be 5 Go Celebrity barging on Channel 5, I guarantee you.
Well, that's the thing. Also, the thing that I found quite annoying was that he says he's going to resign, but he's going to hang around for the next 2 years, if that's how long it is before the next election. And he's going to carry on taking the money and doing absolutely nothing, presumably, for his constituents, or while he tries to find another job. Do you know what I felt was so reprehensible about that as well? It's like a narcissistic obsession. Me, I did all the good things, no one would listen, then everyone else is responsible for all the problems. And then he had the audacity and the temerity to say, it wasn't my issue with what happened with the care homes, it's down to care staff.
That's right.
It's
And you just think, you're going to abdicate all sense of responsibility and push it out on everyone. And this kind of refusal to acknowledge any reality or responsibility represents the worst elements of what's happened to some leaders.
Yeah, absolutely
typical
right.
smarmy politics.
Well, according to him, nothing was his fault, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and everything that he suggested was a good idea.
Yeah.
And everything everybody else suggested was a bad idea. And I'm just amazed Dominic Cummings hasn't crawled out of his basement yet and kind of put the old dead hand on him and, you know, taken him out of the picture. Where is Dominic?
Well, that was us thinking that when the Health Secretary made the decision to release old people from hospital without being tested, so with COVID, into care homes, there was us thinking that was Matt's fault because he was the Health Secretary who made the decision. But no, read the diaries. It wasn't his fault. It was everybody else's.
Yeah, it was his wife's fault as well that he had an affair, probably.
Do you think it's so like Meghan Markle, though?
It is. Well, it's very similar. Self-delusion. Self-delusion. I'll tell you, there's another one. This is my first nomination, and he's been on here before. He is the one and only Mick Grinch, the head of the RMT. I don't call him Mick Lynch anymore because he is actually technically the Grinch who stole Christmas, because not only was he happy to wipe out all of next week with 4 strike days, which everybody knows will basically last from Sunday all the way through to Saturday, and then do the whole of the first week of January. He's now decided that they're going to have a strike on Christmas Eve. And Christmas Eve is one day when an awful lot of people who actually work for a living disappear off to their parents' houses or go to see their other members of their family they don't see. I mean, Christmas Eve is a big travelling day for people who go home for Christmas, whether they're, you know, kids who are teaching or kids who are students or something in a different city. You know, he's literally ruined everything for everybody. And the worst thing about Mick Lynch for me is that it's now become a kind of game to him. You know, it's not really about, you know, anything other now than just winning against the Tories and probably trying to get them out of office. Because now what they do is they call a strike and then they decide to call it off like 2 days before, by which time the train companies all say, well, we can't actually put the trains on anymore. They still get paid, his members still get paid, and it's all a bit of a game to him now. So I think he's a reprehensible character. At the beginning, people were like, oh, he's very clever, isn't he? As if it's surprising that somebody from working class background could be clever, which it isn't actually. You know, there's quite a lot of clever working class people, you know, would you believe? And it turns out now that he's convinced Mark Sawatka, who's the head of the other union, to bring the border force out between the 23rd and the 26th of December at all the airports around the country.
This is a general
I mean, it's
strike.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
This is a general strike, and Mick Lynch is the general of the general strike.
He is.
This is coordinated. This is a coordinated attempt by the unions to bring down an evil Tory government. It's so obvious, and they, of course, deny it.
And I mean, look at that picture of him there. He's a sort of a pound shop Lenin, isn't he? Yeah. I mean, he thinks of himself as some kind of great dictator. Yeah. And he actually has now become convinced that he is cleverer than everybody else.
Yeah, because The Guardian keeps saying he's such a marvellous communicator. If only the politicians and the government were as good at communicating as Mick Lynch, Cockney Mick. He's crap.
He is, really.
I think there is something to be said about when you hear people that are different to the spin that comes out. But one thing I would like to think about is that it'd be very easy for us all to be squabbling amongst ourselves about people, you know, staff and other people wanting to have wages that don't get crushed by inflation and what I would call the cost of lockdown crisis and some things that happened before, quantitative easing, sluggishness. We need to have, like, wealth creation for all. We need to have productivity, investment. And I think that up and down the line, this is a sort of longer-term plan, but we need to have a proper assessment and changing round of how the top-down works, how investment goes. There's too much bureaucracy. And I actually think that we have much more in common with one another, right? I come from the world of hospitality. It's going to be very badly impacted. But I would actually locate the blame with both the government and the opposition for creating this situation. And sometimes people say, yeah, but in the private sector, they don't get the kind of things they're asking for in the public sector. But actually, there have been handouts of our taxpayer money to hospitality and others, and people are asking for more around energy. So that might be Mick.
You better get
that.
No. Yeah, it was a mate of mine. I'm not taking it. So I've already cut him off. No, it's not Mick Lynch. Shut up. Carry on.
So I do get a bit concerned where we could end up all arguing with one another. I think, a bit of solidarity amongst staff and others that are not wanting to be crushed by the cost of inflation and the cost of living crisis. But to be able to articulate a way that we need to really get to grips with our infrastructure, our transport policy. This is true across the public sector.
But it's a bit late for that, isn't it, though, Alan? I mean, we've been looking at this situation now for years. I mean, I agree with you to an extent. I mean, the rail companies are all useless, basically. All the utility companies have been sold off to foreign ownership. You know, the investors are the main people that they care about. I don't know. The other problem is that all the regulators in this country don't seem to regulate anything. You know, the water regulator, nothing. Get nothing from them. You know, the energy regulator. Oh, we'll put a cap on it. What's the cap? £1 million. Oh, great. OK. You know, you can just pay anything you like. There's no kind of coordinated safeguards for people, ordinary working people living and trying to make a decent living. But I don't think that he's helping, is my point.
Here's another thing. So Mick Lynch and the gang, they say, well, the polls have shown that the public's right behind our strike. Well, let me tell you, the first person that doesn't get to see their family at Christmas, he or she will not be behind the strikers. And when these strikes hit and people can't get to see their loved ones over the festive period, this is going to turn out to be the most unpopular strike in history.
Especially after years of maybe not being able to see their family because of the pandemic. It's now onto
I mean,
this.
the airports in particular, there'll be people who want to go abroad, maybe for the first time with their families, or maybe to visit family members abroad, which we've all got, you know, I imagine. And some people won't have seen them for 2 or 3 years. I know people who are going to Australia who haven't seen their family for 3 years. And this was the big Christmas they were all going to get together. And now they're going to find that they won't be able to go.
And they all say, we don't want to do this. Well, don't do it then.
But there is a question that if you want to be effective and do something, when do you do it? Do you do it...
January.
Well, yeah, but so the question is also... is there going to be because a lot of hospitality is saying, can you just get on both sides and come up with an agreement and hammer it out and resolve it? I mean, your point is that they don't want to do that.
No.
I'm not so sure.
Well, let's put it this way.
Why
if
Mick
Lynch gets what he wants from the RMT, the train service doesn't get any better overnight, does it? It doesn't change. All it means is that they continue with the same crap that they've been doing for the last 10 years. So it's not actually working towards something better. It's simply trying to get a bit more money and to keep the ridiculous working practices. You know what I mean?
I do, but I also think the RMT is different to some of the other unions, right, who didn't want to defend their staff and workers during COVID for the mandates and things like that. Actually, the RMT were pro-Brexit, as it happened.
They're so left-wing, they're pro-Brexit.
Well, they were pro-Brexit, but they were also not supporters per se of the Labour Party in the same way some of the other unions are. So I wonder if it's really... And I don't really want to go back to some of those old things, because that left-right thing, in a way, doesn't really... For me, I think that we've got a lot of really serious issues, like you're saying. Is Britain broken?
Yeah.
Are we now becoming like a third-world nation? How can we deal with our services? The public sector needs really grappling with, really readdressing. We spend so much money on it, but we don't actually implement efficiency and rationality. But I'm not sure that people who are on the front line, the staff, are the ones that should always bear the brunt of that.
No, I agree. But the thing, good news is, if we keep going to where we are, we'll get some money from the UN soon, because we'll register as a sort of one of the poorest developing countries in the world. Anyway, Kevin, who's your second one?
My second one is the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
Is that who it is?
There are so many reasons I could nominate the Prime Minister for Plank of the Week, but I'm going to zone in on something that actually took my breath away earlier in the week, when this pious PM, this Green Premier, who sort of reversed Liz Truss's decision to allow fracking. He came in like the carbon net zero fanatic that he is and said, no, we're not going to do fracking. So the last thing we want is for consumers in this country to get a century, 100 years of cheap energy. We want them to have very expensive, inefficient, renewable energy that doesn't work and doesn't supply enough power to this country.
Doesn't keep you warm either.
The mania of it. So no fracking in this country. 2 days ago, he does a deal with Joe Biden, with America, to buy fracked shale gas from America. This is ridiculous. So this is just so he can polish his green halo and say, Britain does not frack. But it's OK to buy fracked gas. It's ludicrous, hypocritical, mad, and this government and the Labour government, they're green as well, if there is going to be a Labour government, they've got to stop doing this to us. We can't afford this carbon net zero green claptrap.
No.
We've got to get cheap energy.
To be fair, it's the first thing he's actually done, because he hasn't done much since he's been in, apart from U-turn on everything that he said he was going to do. So he probably will U-turn on it, because he normally does.
Unfair, Mike. He did send Suella Braverman to France to give them 62 million quid for no apparent reason.
Yeah. What have they done with that?
Well, what they've done with it is they put it in the bank, and like they always do, they went to the beach and punctured 2 dinghies.
I was going to say, they probably,
for a photo op.
They probably bought some more dinghies to put some more people in.
It's pathetic.
It really is. But he is pretty disappointing, isn't he, as a Prime Minister?
As you know, Mike, there's
He's like a manager.
There's a lot of talk around Westminster about how crushingly disappointed the Tories are in this guy, because he hasn't done, as you say, he's done nothing. Yeah. Absolutely nothing.
Well, and also, I mean, there's a couple of things to say about it. Firstly, that I really agree with you. This virtue signalling that actually reflects in us now having discussions about rationing our energy. We should have cheap, abundant energy at source, right? Being able to do that, plentiful. The step away from nuclear was a catastrophe. America has demonstrated how fracking is safe and can be plentiful. And not only are we paying for it there, but there's all that, if they really were concerned about carbon footprints, you've then got to ship it and bring it all over it. It's insane. But like with the backing away from the house building commitment, it's like any sense of having a robust commitment to what we're going to need. This follows on from the last point, but in terms of infrastructure, development, they're backing away. And actually, the cost to us is actually ongoing discussions about rations, power cuts.
Well, it's more just nonsense, isn't it? Because, I mean, I know there's an awful lot of Tory MPs now who don't know whether it's worth standing in the next election, because they don't know what platform they're going to stand on, because they don't know what the Tories stand for. But anyway, coming up next, we'll be back to that in a minute. We're going to be nominating the BBC again. They get it in the neck quite a lot, and quite right too. This is Plank of the Week. Welcome back to Plank of the Week. We're halfway through already. Absolutely amazing. We've still got plenty of plankery to get through, though, so let's start off with Candice and your second nominee. Who is it?
So it's me on Twitter again. I think Twitter is just my thing.
You don't
now.
like Twitter, do you?
No, I don't. I'm hoping that they're going to improve, though. So this week, there was a story about basically how the Twitter employees censored the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Yes.
So the email exchanges that went on. And a lot of people said it was very underwhelming and quite banal how they made this decision. It didn't seem like they were conspiring to influence the election. But for me, the banality was the point.
Yes.
I just thought, who are these people with so much power over the world's information?
Yeah.
And this is how they're making decisions.
Right. Also, what sort of people run a sort of effectively a news and media organisation that don't like a story with cocaine, hookers, you know, all sorts of sex tapes,
President's son, that kind of thing.
I mean, how is that not a great story?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, if they'd had a journalistic background, absolutely. So if they were dealing with just some dodgy link from some unknown person, I could totally understand why they would be cautious. But it was the New York Post. This was an investigative journalist that had verified the story.
Did they not ban the New York Post Twitter account?
They did,
yeah.
which is insane. I mean, when we look back at it now, that was an insane decision. Just these Twitter execs overriding this 100-year-old institution and possibly, almost definitely, influencing the outcome of the election.
But also, this is the other problem that I find in the world today, is that if you're a Democrat or a Republican or a Labour supporter or a Conservative supporter, you'd rather gloss over any wrongdoing by someone on your own side because they're on your side. It's like, well, sorry, if they've done something wrong, surely they've done something wrong. Doesn't matter what their politics are, does it?
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that nowadays it's just you've got to be kind of black or white, or, you know, it's one extreme to the other. Everything has got to be like you've got to stand by that person because they happen to be on your side. I mean, what's it all about? We need to see the wood through the trees and what's actually right and
I mean, there's a story today, going back to old Mick Lynch and the unions, there's a story today about Unite, the union, getting into trouble over this conference centre that they built in the Midlands, you know, where they've supposedly, you know, overrun the budget by some ludicrous amount of money. You know, like some guy put in a tender for 90,000 quid, and it turned out that it ended up costing 43 million. And you kind of go, well, that doesn't sound quite right. And as soon as I tweeted that out, people went, what about the Russian donors in the Tory party? And I'm like, well, OK, but I mean, it's not really the point, is it? This is a different story.
But the thing I've also thought that was, you talk about the banality of it, it was very shocking and really chilling, it sent a chill down my spine, was when the actual attorney involved in it was talking about the First Amendment as though you could just dispense with it. And the whole idea of free speech and what we don't, and where it's enshrined in the American Constitution, a big part. And it really reflects what happened to Twitter and how it was captured, you know, by this particular outlook. And then we've seen so many people be taken down internationally, scientists, journalists and others. Some may have had some very cranky ideas, but actually the best antiseptic to that is to have a debating discussion, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. It was...
Whatever happened to Hunter Biden anyway? Where is he?
He's still out there.
Around.
He's still out there
He's
doing
still
bad.
Around. Yeah.
But this was the well, it's still there. This was the tyranny of spotty-faced geeks and nerds in Silicon Valley wearing backward baseball caps, making decisions about what we were allowed to say and what we were not allowed to say. It was a tyranny, it was a dictatorship. And Elon Musk has come in and pledged to end this. And as I was explaining to you the other day, Mike, he hasn't quite succeeded yet, because I tried to send a tweet the other day saying the lockdowns were a massive mistake. Comes back, are you sure you want to say this?
No, really?
All that. So
isn't that funny?
That level of censorship is still going on. So in his quest to turn Twitter into a genuine forum for free speech, Elon Musk has a way to go.
He does have definitely got a way to go. Who's your next one, Alan?
My next plank of the week is Lucy Powell. She's the Undersecretary of State, and her comments on the online safety bill is that we should not have free speech.
Well, she is in the Labour Party.
Shadow Undersecretary.
Yes, Shadow Undersecretary, sorry. And we should not have free speech because of the harms that it could impact. And we have to consider on the harms.
She's quite right, of course.
And I think it
Careful what you say now.
Exactly. And so the online safety bill, which leads on to what we were talking about similarly with Twitter, this whole idea that we need to regulate speech and stop certain things that are hateful or harmful, or, and, you know, who chooses those things? Who makes those decisions? Now, we have seen it amended because of a lot of good work that various people have done to challenge it. So the legal but harmful element has come out. But there's a continuation of the idea, precisely what you were saying, right, that Silicon Valley decision makers in the terms and conditions should have it. So the government's trying to outsource that. And Lucy Powell is saying, but actually the whole idea that we should have free speech, it negates the question of all the harms that are going to come to us. And I think it's really horrifying that, you know, the idea that we should be able to discuss things and also hear terrible things, right, horrible things, but cope with it and win people over to one another's ideas and be able to shed some light on things is dispensed, right? It's, again, this idea that we have these technocrats, those that know better, the great and the good, and the great unwashed us lot, we can't exercise judgment, we can't hear those things.
No, because you don't know what you're doing. You know, you're an idiot, effectively, aren't you? I mean, I don't mean that.
Well, exactly.
But that's what they think.
Yeah, and the idea that we're all about...
Your guests.
What it really shows is this idea that, you know, the people that both that are running things, but also the Labour Party, that Labour, the whole idea, their connection with people and the Labour is gone, and they're just terrified of people. They're terrified of the public. They think that we're always about to go and do something that's terrible, rather than the fact that it's our friends, neighbours, families, colleagues, decent people. There's always a few rotten apples, but generally... people, and it's the shuttering of what we're allowed to talk about and discuss, and we should reject it.
And the problem is, Alan, is who are the arbiters of this?
Yeah.
You know, I maintain that the worst moment in recent British history was the instigation of hate crimes, hate laws, because...
I thought it was when they gave you breakfast.
Yeah, well, that as well. You know, so Tony Blair brought those in, I think, right at the end of the 1990s, and then they were stepped up and up and up. So you had all these things, and when he brought them in, I think it was 1998, the first hate crime laws, that was the first time since the 17th century that things you might say could be ruled illegal. In other words, it was the first laws that stopped us saying things, that made things, the spoken word, illegal. And the problem with hate crime laws, the problem with what Lucy Powell's talking about, who decides what hate is?
I do. And I'm deciding that you're going on too long because we've got to get onto the BBC, so I'm afraid.
I hate you.
I'm going to curtail your free speech right now. Amanda, come on.
OK, so the BBC...
Cheer us all up, for God's sake. We're all sitting here moaning about everything.
BBC...
That doesn't cheer us up.
Yeah, that's... Sorry, that doesn't really, does it? So I'm going to get rid of them today because of them axing our Top of the Pops. Christmas Day, Top of the Pops.
Good.
So
I didn't even know Top of the Pops was still a thing.
Yeah,
I heard about this the other day. I didn't know
you're the last person watching
57 years it's been on. OK, I don't watch it, you know, I don't sit there and I'm not glued to it. I'm normally probably had a few Prosecco's. But I like that it's on. It's just got the music on the background. It's, you know, and it's one of those institutions. And I also think this is like the wrong year to get rid of it. You know, we're going to have our first King's speech rather than Queen's speech. So I feel like it's just a bit too much change for people. We can't handle it. We don't like it.
Thursday night Top of the Pops. That has been on for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's been gone for ages. Yeah, that's gone. They are doing a very late. I think it's like 10:40 p.m. or something. They're doing a sort of roundup. But the actual one that you have all the top hits of the year, that's just gone.
Yeah, but the problem is, it's like all Christmas TV shows, no one watches them anymore. The only show that will get a really significant audience on Christmas Day will be the King's speech. Yeah. That'll be 7 or 8 million. And, you know, the BBC has churned out the same old crap.
Nobody's watching anything anymore.
It's
like
EastEnders, Call the Midwife, Mrs. Brown's Boys and the Strictly Christmas special. They've been doing that now for 15 years. It's ridiculous. But the problem is no one watches it because it's so unimaginative and repetitive, and no one really watches Top of the Pops, so they're wasting their money. That's why they've axed it.
But I think they're choosing the wrong things that they think because this is a
the
cost-saving
thing, you can imagine
measure.
they've had a very long thought process before they decided to ban Top of the Pops. I mean, what sort of idiot does that? I mean, it's one thing at Christmas people can have a bit of fun with.
Thank
you. Let's do another Richard and David Attenborough special, you know.
Whereas we've got,
something to do with the planet.
David Attenborough, the most unimaginative broadcaster.
Why
don't you make a program about something else apart from animals, you old bore?
Yeah, I know, some fish. How about fish? Yeah, all right, do one on fish. This is Plank of the Week, of course. Coming up next, I'll be picking the winner, but I've also got one more nomination, and he's a footballer as well. Anyway, welcome back to Plank of the Week. Kevin O'Sullivan can barely conceal his glee at my next pronouncement, which is, of course, my final plank, and it is that great man, Ronaldo. Now, you'll all have remembered Piers Morgan's spectacular interview with Ronaldo, where he kiboshed his own career at Manchester United. I know he probably wanted to do that. Piers thinks he's the best footballer in the world. Everybody else thinks it's Lionel Messi.
Yep.
But Cristiano Ronaldo, however, has gone straight from his flouncing out of Manchester United to now flouncing out of Portugal, because he went, of course, off to Qatar to play in the World Cup, and he wasn't playing that well. So the coach, whose name is Fernando Santos, dropped him against Switzerland, right? And he got very sulky and didn't really fancy coming on, but he eventually came on. But the guy who played in his place is a guy called Gonzalo Ramos, 21 years of age, Benfica centre forward, scored a hat-trick, right? Ronaldo at this point had only scored 1 goal in the whole tournament, right? So he then had another row with the coach and was threatening, apparently, according to Portuguese newspapers today, to go home. he was threatening to do a Roy Keane and just chuck it all in. So, I mean, I'm sorry. I know he's a brilliant guy. And he's a great footballer. He's worth gazillions of pounds. But I'm afraid I'm going to make him a plank this week because he's probably not going to be picked to start in the next.
Well, they found the formula, haven't they?
He's refusing to train with the substitutes, which is what he's supposed to do. So he keeps going to train with the actual team. And he's just, you know he's going to start.
They're playing the captain.
Well, yeah, they're playing Morocco on Saturday. And you can imagine if he's not playing, he'll just be sulking and sort of skiffing his boots at the sidelines.
Something weird that happened because Portugal looked amazing the moment he wasn't playing for them. And at the end of the game, as the players celebrated their astonishing
he wasn't joining
victory,
in, was he?
They all jumping up and down, dancing. You see this miserable character in the distance just sloping off. So he's a bit of a sulker.
He is a bit of a sulker. I mean, he loves to be the centre of attention, and that's all fine.
And there he is sulking.
And there he is sulking. But, you know, if it doesn't go his way... And, I mean, even he has had to admit that actually it wasn't a bad idea to drop him because this new young player,
hasn't been playing
Ramos,
well,
has done really, really well. So, I mean, they might not even beat Morocco because Morocco were amazing.
Morocco, good.
You know, and it's going to be quite an exciting weekend. But, of course, there's no games tonight, so you should be watching this Plank of the Week. But so, you know, Ronaldo makes it. So now we have to go through the torturous process, ladies and gentlemen, of picking the winner, which I will now do because I think there can really only be one winner this week, can't there? I mean, I did think about the strikers because we've had the strikers from Mick Lynch to Mark Sawatka to the NHS. We've had Oxfordshire County Council trying to finish everybody's life off. Chris Whitty was a good one, wasn't it? Yeah. The BBC's always popular. I think it's got to be Harry and Meghan, though. I don't see how it cannot be,
doesn't it?
Harry and Meghan. We're fighting oppression from our private jet. We're hoping to stop all racial discrimination.
Harry.
So I think Harry and Meghan, not for the first time, are going to win Plank of the Week because
agreed.
In the end, they're very deserving. And I've got a feeling, you know, when we film Plank of the Year, which we're going to be doing very shortly before the end of the year comes, I think they might well be the winners of that.
Get an S on the end. Planks of the Week.
Planks of the Week. Well, we can give it to them, can't we?
Yeah.
The people who don't get out much because they've got young children.
I mean,
they're always out. Always out.
It's the most ridiculous thing of all time. So well done. Technically, you haven't won it, Candice, but you know it's always nice to be given the winning number. Coming up, we will of course be having more planks next week. We'll have a different team of people here, but there's so much to do. There's so many people we had to leave out of this, so we'll probably add them in. And of course, England will have played in the World Cup quarter-finals by next week, so they might be in there. I'd love to put Gareth Southgate in as plank.
Yeah.
So if they don't win, he's definitely going in there. But thank you very much to Kevin O'Sullivan. Thank you very much to Candice. Thank you to the two newbies. You guys will see next week. Plank of the Week.